along down this road with me.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Speak Project. My name is Tank, and this is Speak Up with Tank. Tonight we are going to be talking to Gerald, Dante, Mino, the Archbishop from the old church, from the old traditional Catholic Church, very more proper doctrine than what many of us might associate with the Catholic Church. We're going to talk to him in a little bit. But first we're going to do a little recap and talk about some of the things going on. So, Gunnar, are you on the call by any chance?
Yes, I'm here.
So, Gunnar, you missed...
Can you hear me?
Really amazing... Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, Gunnar, you missed really an amazing show last night, man. We had a visionary contractor, I guess. You know, I hate to even limit him to that, but Larry Raines, he was just a beautiful soul. His vision of what is going to happen, man, and he's actually building these incredible, very elaborate these new homes using this methodology where the 3D printers, and he's actually taken the basic premise of the 3D, the basic 3D print houses, right? And he's expanded them to make them like luxury homes. It's going to be really, really amazing. And not only that, but he's putting all types of organic material into it, and he's going to make those things come to life for people. So it should be very
cool.
exciting. So if you have not listened to any of my shows, you should definitely listen to yesterday's and pass it on, because that was really incredible. Because we talk a little bit, we kind of plug some things in there about the rest of the world, what's going on. But the content is incredible. I mean, the things that we're going to be able to do. Gunnar, we've been talking about doing this. We've put all these pieces in place for those who don't know that with the Manna World Holding Trust, which is the core funding source for really for the governments and really the entire financial system. And that entire system has had to be restructured, replanned, and changed because of the very, very corrupt activity that you see going on all over the world. So, you know what? I prepared a little update, so I think this will kind of hit the nail on the head. So let me just get that prepped up. Man, I'm telling you, if you don't listen to any other show, last night was... Gunnar, are you firing at me? What just happened?
It wasn't me.
We'll just pretend like we did that on purpose and keep it moving. So, Gunnar, you built your own house by any chance? Did you build your own house?
No, I have a house, but I didn't build it. Me and the bank are paying for it.
I think the bank already paid it off with your birth certificate, right? But
yeah, exactly.
Gunnar, we're going to remember how we started this, right? We started by just wanting to have a little, create change distribution centers, right, and kind of grow from there. We talked about adding a healing center. Now in reality, Larry and I were talking about this last night, we're really going to make whole communities, living communities where people are thriving, right, and they get away from the grid and away from the whole system. It's going to be amazing. So here's an update right now. Let's just ride and see how this goes. And further information in the Swamp Monster Report, we would like to get to the bottom of what's happening with the FBI Chief Counsel James Baker, who is currently on a media tour. He's also under investigation by John Durham for leaking to the press. This is the same John Durham who Attorney General Bill Barr tapped to get to the bottom of the spying against President Trump. James Baker claims now that he was skeptical and concerned with the Steele dossier, but he approved its use in the Carter Page FISA anyways, because why follow the laws or get to the bottom or verify any actual information? We'll just throw it against the wall and see what happens. Generally, the FBI was used to getting away with murder on many occasions, so they didn't really feel like they had to follow the rules, nor did they ever think anybody would bring it to light. Ohio Representative Jim Jordan pointed out today that the Democrats are planning a coordinated effort to target President Trump, trying to impose impeachment where there is absolutely no evidence that shows that President Trump has done anything but an excellent job. It was pointed out today that President Trump has job rates up, employment is up, pay is up, the economy is booming, and yet he continues to be attacked by the Democrats. If the Democrats were, in fact, concerned with the actual people, they would be focused on what is best for the people. More jobs, more money, all these things benefit the people of America. Representative Jordan also had a hearing that addressed the facial recognition software that's being used, and there is 50 million cameras that utilize the facial recognition software, and this creates a massive database acquiring people's information and connecting it back to the DMV and other sources. The FBI has access to this information, thus violating both the First and Fourth Amendment rights, and this is proportionately biased towards African Americans. So in the real news of what's actually happening, there is a storyline that exists behind everything that you are hearing. Right now, today, what's being reported is that President Trump took a stand and that he would not and really could not work with Democratic leaders who continue to pursue a witch hunt against him, even though he's been cleared by the House itself, the Senate, and a special investigation team formed by the FBI. Regardless of that, what they're actually doing is they refuse to accept that they have been defeated. So they're trying anything they can to create distractions, anything they can to make it look like someone else is to blame for all the things taking place. So he had a meeting with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi that lasted just 5 minutes. And the reason why it only lasted 5 minutes is because the $2 trillion they agreed upon to bring in for the infrastructure was cleared by the Pentagon. And then, right after that, true to form, Steve Mnuchin, come to find out, had made a deal with the Chinese elders to steal that money and give it to China and then try to pull off the fake GCR, the global currency reset, or the currency revaluation exchanges. This is the narrative that sets up everything for them, because if that happens, that begins a series of events which essentially lead to the depopulation of 90% of the population over the next 12 or so years. So President Trump is adamantly fighting that. And what took place today was just more evidence of that. That's why when Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi left the meeting from President Trump, they were all smiles because they thought they had pulled one over on President Trump. But that did not happen because it's impossible to steal from the Manna World Holding Trust. It's impossible to steal from a real quantum system that is already functioning on a planet where we are just starting to explore the basics of quantum systems. The real quantum system is so far advanced, it's roughly 1,000 years ahead of any technology that we have on this planet. So the entire financial system is operating using that. The only way any obstruction is even possible to bring these funds in for the people, and specifically for projects, is because people on the lower levels, they are deceived. They are used to the current system, and they're focused on conforming to that system, which is run by the Dragon families, the Order, and the Rothschilds. Now, because of that, they continually make bad karmic decisions which support an agenda which is designed to wipe out the entire population of the planet. Now, this has got to change because that will never be allowed. Regardless, the entire financial system has been completely reprogrammed in a language that no one else on the planet really understands. But unfortunately, there was some access that was attempted by the secret space program this past weekend. Therefore, Kim had to go back in, scrap the plan where we were finally finished, and she's deleting whole sections of code to relaunch again. She is currently in the programming room, and we are still fighting this same battle. Nevertheless, it is inevitable. We have already won. To all of those who are in these seats in government, there is absolutely no way for you to claim victory in this battle. No matter which way you go, this system has you absolutely covered. And if at some point permission is given to take more aggressive action, I would not want to be you. So with that in mind, everybody come on board and let's start funding projects for the entire world. And that is all connected to what's taking place. And that is the very reason why President Trump cannot work with Democrats, because it's not Democrats. It's Democratic leadership and they are the deep state right now. They're the head of the deep state, and because of that, President Trump is in a polar opposite end of the spectrum than they are. And that's why. We don't have the same agenda. President Trump is for the people. We here at the Speak Project, we are for the people. The Manna World Holdings Trust is for the people. Tommy Williams, the Truth, Honor, and Integrity Show, they're for the people. These are movements where people are acting in the best interest of the people. The Pentagon right now, to the best of my knowledge, they are for the people. So at some point, Pentagon, it's time for you to get soldiers in those banks and get this done, because something has got to give, and it's got to give now. So, Gunner, did you know all
Yeah, that was
going on?
great update. I enjoyed that. Yeah, that was wonderful.
Trying to tighten these things up. So, what do you think about this with the facial recognition software? That's pretty alarming, don't you think?
Well, yeah, it is. And it's, you know, I don't know. It's alarming that the FBI is tapping into the databases of, you know, of the states and local governments and stuff like that too. You know, I mean, I'm sure without intentionally doing it, I'm sure that they, you know, they've got all kinds of pictures of me. You know, it's they do. It's really
they told me they circulate them around. It's awful. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm kidding. Not really.
Well,
but you know, here's what's funny. You know, Kim talked about this, right? Because now when Kim was 18, so that would mean, let's see, 1970. So you know, like 1988, they were using the facial recognition software because that's how they identified her. And the way they did it is back then they used to have something. Well, this was disabled in 2012, I think. The looking glass technology. So the looking glass technology was basically these 12 women who were like the seers, right? And if all 12 of them saw the same event happen, they could pretty much count on it happening just that way. And so they saw various individuals who were going to work to bring about this change. And Kim was one of those individuals they identified, right? And in that, you know, what it didn't tell them is exactly the timing. It didn't say when or, you know, things like that. They would just kind of see different events, right? So, you know, you'd see a dog run across the road, and then you'd see a car pass by, and somebody go to Starbucks, and you know, a building will blow up. So you knew if you saw those first three things, you know, that was a good indicator. So, but that is how they identified Kim all the way back then. So from that standpoint, you know, their technology actually worked against them because I don't think they foresaw her, you know, going down this path. But pretty amazing stuff, right?
Yeah, it is. So
the other thing that disturbed me about that report that I thought was worth pointing out is, and you know, Representative Jim Jordan was nailing this. Who I like him a lot, and he was saying, like, he was pointing out, he's like, so the FBI can just make a phone call, and he kept pointing out, he said this unelected official from the FBI. Now, why would the FBI have unelected officials? Because they're a privately owned organization. And also, the IRS was using the same exact software to identify people and cause problems, you know, and identify them for tax purposes. So, you know, it was being used illegally, violating our constitutional rights. And it's amazing that people want to think that's conspiracy theory. I mean, this was talked about in Congress today. You know.
Yeah, well, what about the CIA? I'm sure they're accessing those same pictures.
I'm sure they are. I mean, the CIA, the NSA, I mean,
it's illegal for them to spy on Americans, but we know they're doing it, you know?
Well, when I was more closely associated with the RV, I would have drones outside my house every night of the week. And when I spoke to my various contacts in the intelligence agencies and the White Hats and such, they would always tell me they're there for your protection. You know, which I believed, you know, but it's weird. Apparently I don't need as much protection now because I hardly ever see them now.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah. Exactly. I have a question really fast. You were talking about the meeting between Trump and Pelosi and Schumer, and so I mean, so Nancy Pelosi keeps speaking, and she keeps stumbling all over herself and can't complete a sentence. And of course the mainstream media doesn't say anything about it, but everybody just always assumes that she's drunk all the time. I mean, if she's drunk, she's doing some really heavy drinking there in Washington D.C. And
so yeah.
Exactly. Of course, we know that it's because she's probably short on adrenochrome, and but of course nobody can talk about that. But so I guess I don't know. I mean, if Trump, for example, if he talked like that, you can better believe that the mainstream media and the Democrats would be calling for his resignation, But nobody thinks that there's a need for Pelosi to resign just because she can't complete a sentence every time she gives a speech,
Okay, here is my favorite Nancy Pelosi quote. Write this down and cement it into your mind when you think about how important Congress is, okay? Nancy Pelosi said, "My dementia will not affect my ability to be the Speaker of the House." Now, first of all, I beg to differ, right? If you have dementia, you should not be the Speaker of the House, right? But the reason why she said that is because she knew, hey, she was going to be the Black Dragon, right? Because George Herbert Walker Bush was being taken down, being euthanized. And so she knew she was going to take that role, and she'd have, prime rights to get enough adrenochrome, which would essentially fight off the effects of, dementia. But adrenochrome is not something, your body stops making your adrenaline, and then you become dependent on it, right? So just to survive. That's why you see Bill Clinton, who looks like, he's got AIDS and, falling like a skeleton. He looks terrible. Because he doesn't have access.
Right.
But that should be a concern, because that means either our Congress has really no value whatsoever, because you guys could have, the Speaker of the House can be anybody, right? It doesn't matter. You have dementia, that's fine. We don't really care what you have to say. In other words, we're just going to let you get up there and repeat words and read a script and do things like that. Because it's not going to affect her ability to be a Speaker of the House, because as far as she's concerned, there's no actual work to do, right? Because how many laws have they created and passed? Really, I mean, they haven't done anything. They've been too busy hunting down Trump to try to prove some nonsensical point and take him out. But if it was any other president with this success, everybody would be singing his praises. Everybody would be talking about it. But because he's disrupting their agenda, and that's what's tearing things apart. So I'm going to let I don't see Gerald on here yet, the Archbishop. So for anybody who wants to call in, we got a bunch of callers. I'm about to bring some of you on. So if I bring you on, please shut your internet off and just listen to the phone. I'm going to say the first three numbers of your phone number, and don't come on and say, "Is that you?" It's you. Don't ask how we're doing. We're doing great. Just go right into your question or your comment, whatever it is that you want to share. And if anybody else would like to call in, the number is 646-721-9771. And Gunner, I'm hoping today we're not going to have any phone issues. Let's see how it goes. 314.
Me too.
314, you're on. Wow, and amaze us. Ask us an incredible question.
Hey, Tank, it's Leanne. I'm just listening to the call. I have no question. Sorry.
That's okay.
Way to go,
Leanne's
Gunner.
our veteran. She should know, right? Leanne, why don't you stick around as long as I got you here? Okay. Just in case you want to chime in, okay? All right. Let's see who else is here. All right, 919. Bring me on.
I didn't have a question. Just listen in.
Okay, you're out. Got it. No problem. All All right. I'm not sure. Oh, this might be Gerald. Let's see. Hello, this is Tank. Who's on the call? You're on the computer? Is this the CIA? I just want to thank you for your participation. Gerald?
Yes.
The Archbishop, the one and only, Gerald Dante Mino. Am I saying your name right, Gerald? I feel like I'm not.
No, you did. You're doing perfect. I'm going to go and grab a piece of earpieces so that we can talk and you don't get any feedback. Okay. But I can talk right now.
No problem. I got some other callers. Go ahead, take your time. We'll be here.
All right. That's my number.
All right. We got you. All right, 276. You're on the call. Anybody there? All right. So Gunnar.
Mm-hmm.
We gotta ask the Archbishop some good questions here, okay? Because
okay.
I think a lot of people are watching the unraveling of the Catholic molestation club, that has turned out to be, most of the priesthood. It feels like, anyways, right? I would say that's my perception. It seems to be a common practice. They just busted up a massive pedophilia ring running directly out of the Catholic Church in Pennsylvania, and the priests were actually, they were keeping score. They had a whole system, a whole underground system they would use to judge and assess, the quality of their, predatory habits, so to speak, of these young men and women. I'm assuming, but I usually hear about young boys.
Mm-hmm.
So the Archbishop is a different cut. He's from, he's very much against that. He has orphanages set up all over the world, and that he's been supporting and helping people. And before that, he's actually an energy healer, which I don't think many people, many priests you would know that would be energy healers or admit to it. And before that, he was actually married and in the corporate world. So he's had a really interesting path that we're all going to learn from. Bishop, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Are you ready?
I had to. I'm ready.
So tell us, please, enlighten us, give us hope in some of this organized religion. What is it? I noticed that in your bio it says that you are the Archbishop. You're up in Montreal or in that area. And what does it mean? What's different about the way that you're involved with the Catholic Church versus what we're seeing play out in the mainstream?
Well, I'm what is considered an autocephalous bishop. And the reason we are autocephalous is the Roman Catholic Church doesn't want traditional Catholic priests, and I celebrate the Latin Mass. And I heard your comments in the past couple of weeks about the Latin Mass and your opinion of it, so it is what it is. But I grew up in the traditional Latin Rite and have lived the better part of my life in that field. I wanted to be a priest when I was a kid, but I married a Polish Jew when I was 18. So I've had an interesting life.
That's quite the hard right turn there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it created an interesting life for me, but my wife miscarried 3 times, lost 2 sets of twins, and then lost a boy. It was kind of devastating for me, and I had no idea that one day God would give me more children than I could shake a stick at.
No kidding.
I've had.
Let me go ahead, Bishop.
Go ahead.
So
let
me
was
just
saying,
clarify for anybody who doesn't know. I don't believe in any Latin Mass to the congregations. One, and this is my opinion, that it's a dead language. The traditional Latin Mass is done with the priest back to the audience. I do believe this is part of the process of casting spells. It's a language where people weren't really encouraged to understand what the priest was saying or understand the scriptures themselves. That started to change in about 1958 when there was a book that came out called Elohim, the Archetype, Original Pattern of the Universe, which exposed the reasoning behind that. So that's my logic, okay? But
no,
the bishop,
hey, I understand your logic.
I have a lot of confidence in. Yeah.
I understand your logic. You know, we celebrate the Latin Rite because we feel that we are supposed to lead people to God. We are not God. And, you know, I often go into churches nowadays, modern churches, and I see a priest or presider, like in a Masonic temple, sitting at the head of the altar, basically directing the flow, and he's the one that's worshipped. And I don't want to be worshipped. You know, I just want to guide people to God. But, you know, I celebrate also the Orthodox Rite and the Novus Ordo Rite. I've celebrated the Novus Ordo Rite in South America because the traditional Latin Mass, everyone forgot Latin down there. But I've done it in Spanish. But I've never done it in English. I've never celebrated the Novus Ordo Mass in English. And one of the reasons I became a missionary when I was in South America, there was a lot of Roman Catholic churches, but a lot of people that wanted the sacraments, they couldn't afford the sacraments. If they didn't have money to give to the church, they were kind of ostracized and put aside. And, you know, my being a priest, I went into whatever country I was at and presented myself to the prelates of the Roman Catholic Church. And I would say who I was and what I was doing there, and that I was there to work with the poor people and basically offer the sacraments. And they said, go for it. You won't find any money in it. And I never did. You know, I worked with the poor people, the downtrodden. And, you know, I worked in the corporate world to subsidize my income in the church. Almost all the money that I made in the corporate world, and I made good money. I worked for Kroger for a number of years in Cincinnati in the head office, and I converted a lot of their IBM System 36s to an AS400 platform. I took all the coding from all their various divisions, and I standardized it, and that was my expertise in the corporate world, working in the IBM world. And
you know,
I have a unique background in the sense that my father did not want me to be alive, and my mother did everything to protect me. So she left him 3 months after she married him. He wanted to have me aborted, and then she went to jail for the first year of my life as though she had aborted me because she would not tell my father that I had been born. And in the province of Quebec in 1957, that was deadly against the law. You know, you don't do that. And she brought me to an Indian reserve, so I spent the first year of my life on the Oka Reserve outside of Montreal. And 4 days after she brought me there, she was arrested. And she chose to spend the first year of my life in jail rather than acknowledging that she had given me birth. And she didn't trust anyone, not even in her own family. She didn't know who to trust because many people were friends with my father. And so she registered me under the name Omni, O-M-N-I, instead of Mino, which was her maiden name. And hence, I became a priest.
Of course. Well, that is a pretty incredible story. By the way, I would love to call you Archbishop Omni. That's awesome. But anyways, so
some people do.
You know, yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, you know, like the omnipresent, right? So,
yes,
Bishop, let me ask you. So, in this, with these different things, the sacraments and all these, different things, and you've described a lot of this to me. We've talked about this before, and you've said how there's certain things that happen. Now, your character and your integrity is not up for question, in my opinion. There's nobody that's going to ever lump you in with everyone else, to me. Because I know that you stand for more than just the Catholic Church. These practices that were installed in the Catholic Church, or they go back to Constantinople, where he tried to integrate the various religions all into one, because you had the Baalists, which some would call Satanists, and they would participate in various sacrifices and other things. So they were tearing up everything. So he forced them to conform to Catholicism, and also they had a choice. They could be Jews or they could be Catholic. So in the Jewish faith, that's why you have some perversions there with the Kabbalah, right? Which they call Jewish mysticism, which we call the Kabbalah, really, but and that's why there's a lot of issues that those are not the same, right? And I think it's really important to define, that you can't just lump everybody in, for the sins of, the few. But to that point, they did create the idea of tithing, and they've added that to the Bible. And the idea of tithing was, you might not be any good, but you want to buy your way into heaven, you can. And that is actually what it was taught, right?
I know that was taught, but Tank, I have to be honest with you. I watched my grandmother do all the linen for the church, and she ran a hotel. She owned a hotel, and she was busy, and she would do all the altar cloths for both the Orthodox Church in Kirkland Lake, Ontario, and the Roman Catholic Church, and it was her way of doing things. And I remember coming downstairs one day. I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I saw the priest saying to my grandmother, "You need to give more to the church. You run a hotel." And we ran a hotel. Whoever came in the front door paid $7 a night to stay in our place. They had fresh linen, bedding, and everything in a room. However, whoever came in the back door through the kitchen from the bush, they got the same benefits on top of having a meal, and my grandmother would often wash their clothes and give them a clean change of clothes. So I grew up that way, and I felt it always balanced itself out. My grandparents were not rich by any means, but they loved people and they took care of a lot of people. I remember my grandfather telling me that in the wartime he almost lost his hotel, which he had built from the ground up as a carpenter. And the reason he almost lost it is lack of paying taxes. So he was in court, and all of a sudden, there was 200 people that walked into the courtroom, and they said to the judge, there was a couple of people that were speakers, and they said to the judge, if it wasn't for Mr. Mino, we wouldn't have had food in our bodies or clothing over our heads. And whenever any of us were sick, his wife would always take care of us. And there was never any money exchanged. So if you want to take away the hotel for some people that really care about other people, then do so. But and the judge threw it out of court. So my grandfather won, and nothing else was said about it. And we grew up that way. All of us, my aunts and uncles, and we grew up that way, being charitable and caring for other people. And because of my story that I started with, go ahead.
So, but with that in mind, now those experiences speak to the character and the reputation of your family name, right? Of who you are and who you were raised to be. It doesn't exonerate the church by any means. So my question really is, well, actually, no, continue with what you're saying, though, because you're talking about you were raised this way, and it's obvious. Yeah. I mean, it's anybody who does. I mean, obviously, many people don't know the bishop, but he's kind, and he is literally a man given to charity, right? His life has been dedicated to service, and it's obviously it's much more a family tradition, you know. And if your grandmother was the Pope, I mean, maybe things would be different, but obviously that's not afforded to her.
I would never want to be the Pope.
I can imagine. I'm sure it's a very difficult rite of passage, and I don't think it involves doing good deeds.
Yeah.
So, but you've maintained a loyalty to the Catholic Church, right? And I know we have a little bit of a delay.
Well,
so I apologize for.
I consider myself. I consider myself a Christian Archbishop because I have Anglican roots on my father's side. I have Orthodox roots on my grandfather's side and Roman Catholic roots on my grandmother's side. And I was raised in between the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. And when I was consecrated a bishop, I was consecrated in the Antiochene Rite, which is in the Act of the Apostles in Antioch, where Christians were first called Christians. So I consider myself a Christian Archbishop. I celebrate the Orthodox Rite with an Orthodox community. I celebrate the Anglican Rite with the Anglicans, and I celebrate the Roman Rite with the Catholics. There's still a lot of senior citizens that don't go to church anymore for the simple reason they want the sacraments, but they feel that walking into a Roman Catholic church nowadays is like walking into Walmart. And a lot of them have seen such atrocities, and I instill in my people, I have a lot of people all over the world that I communicate with on a daily basis. I'm not in the greatest of health, but I still communicate with them through Skype, through WhatsApp, and whatever other means, and Messenger. And I listen to them. I listen to their people, and I tell them all, live according to the Beatitudes and take care of people. Love them. And you don't need to walk around with a ton of gold in order to get anything accomplished. You set out your mindset as to what you want to do. And I've never taken a dime from any of my communities. I've never asked for money. We don't even pass when I celebrate Mass, I don't even pass a collection plate. Never have. Everything that I've done, I've built on my own. Because I wanted to basically work for God and protect his children on the planet. I realized, about Jeremy, my adoptive son, who I love very much. I don't instill religion in him. I don't force him into anything. He has participated on various occasions when Bishop Matthias was here in Canada. To various levels, but I don't impose it on anyone. I don't believe in imposing it, but I'm very protective of Jeremy in particular. He was a part of my life when he was little, and he's still a part of my life today because of his mental background. It's not, you'll hear some of my music. I sent them off to Gunner, and you'll hear some of my music. He mixed all of that, but his mother is the one that accompanied me to all of it. She either played the keyboard or even sang in the background with me. I want to make the world a better place. I have a lot of ideas. I was a vice president of 3 different multi-million-dollar corporations. I walked away from it because as being a vice president in information systems was one thing. I designed systems. However, I was told by the last corporation that I worked for that if I designed X number of systems, they would take the people. I knew I was going to fill their jobs. I was automating everything they were doing manually. And the company had promised me that they would basically take those people and put them in other areas of the company and re-educate them, which is all fine and good if you're, right up to 45, 50 years old. But if you're in your 60s and getting close to retirement, who's going to want to go back to school and learn something and start all over? It's just not going to happen. Not feasible either, Attention span is low, and people at that age are manual. The ones that are manual are very manual, and, you can't really teach an old dog new tricks. You can try, but good luck.
So you really took a stand seeing this ahead of time. You really saw what I would refer to, the order or the cabal, in exactly the way they do things. They were using you in a sense, right, to create systems that are more efficient, which makes sense. And but in that, they said they promised to reassign people, but they knew they were going to have a certain amount of losses, I'm sure. And obviously, it's much more profitable if you put a better system in place, and they don't have to pay as many people. So you reduce their overhead. And you saw that on the wall, and you took a stand. You basically walked away from that world so that you could make the world a better place.
That's right. And I remember, when they wanted to start doing layoffs, they made me vice president of human resources. And when I laid off the first person, I had a bathroom in my office. When I laid off the first person, I walked into my bathroom and I threw up. When I laid off the second person, I had the runs. When I laid off the third person, I was shaking so bad, I felt so guilty. It was absolutely depressing, enough to cause me to almost have a nervous breakdown. I said, I don't want to do this. You promised me. I went back downstairs to my boss and I said, you promised me certain things. The corporation promised me certain things, and it's not happening. And you're expecting me to lay off 210 people that I have worked on the shop floor with and I've studied under in order to automize their jobs, and you're telling me to lay them off? They set you up. They set you up. Yeah. Oh, big time. Yeah. Big time. And I called my wife when it was happening. I was still married at the time. I called my wife and I called my mother and I told my mother what was going on. And my mother says, Gerald, she says, if it's not you, somebody else will do it. And I said, that's not good enough, Mom. That's not good enough. I don't want to be that person. It's not who I am. It's not how I'm made up. I'm going to court with Jeremy tomorrow morning. He has issues that he ran away from home. He thought I was going to move in with his mom at one point in time because of my health. And he ran away and created havoc out on the street. So I got to go and clean that up tomorrow morning.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But
Jeremy is somewhat of a savant.
He is. He's a genius. He's ahead of his time on. And you know what? He watches you every now and then. I'll put your broadcasts on the show in the dining room, and we normally eat around 8 or 9 o'clock, and he'll listen to you, and he says, I like Tank. He says, he's a man after my own heart.
Oh, I like that. Well, you know what? I'm an expert at bringing out and finding positions that fit people and based on their unique skill set. So I promise you, if his time comes and he wants to work, I feel like he would be excellent at a lot of things. I just got to figure out what those things are. So we'll find a place. He's a graphic artist. He can he can play guitar. He can sing. He sings like an angel, and he also paints. And I know that you do a lot of those things yourself. So, yes, indeed. I told him that you do, and he says, I like him. You can feel free to call me anytime, Joe. I mean that when I say that. I am. How old is he now?
He's 34. He's 34, but he has the mentality of a 20-year-old because of the drugs he's done for a number of years. And he does drugs. You know, I had to go to 3 different doctors, 2 psychiatrists today, and a family doctor, and pick up letters for court tomorrow. And I was reading the entire profile, and I was thinking, 18 years of being in and out of the system, and whenever his mother didn't understand him, she would penalize him and want him sedated and everything. And since he's been with me since 2015, I've done my utmost to raise him to a point where he can basically voice his opinion, whether I like what he has to say to me or not. I want him to tell me, never lie to me. He never has. I want him to tell me exactly how he's feeling on whatever subject he's feeling. And I feel very strong about that. And I've taken him from having the mentality of a 12-year-old to the mentality of a 20-year-old in 4 years. I have a master's in psychology, and you know, it's not a matter of letting him do everything that he wants to do, but it's a matter of reasoning and discussing with him the ramifications of all his actions. And, you know, I do that on a daily basis with him. And I keep him company. He keeps me company. He's in his room painting right now, a masterpiece. And, you know, the grandchild of a friend of ours. And, he's so talented on so many levels, but he doesn't like getting into mundane conversations. He finds most people boring. They don't stimulate him. He can't have a conversation with you about the weather. You want to talk about the stars. You want to talk about the cosmos. You want to talk about the aliens. You want to talk about a lot of things. He's your man. You want to have a dumb, boring conversation about it's nice and sunny out today and grass needs cutting. Oh, well, it's pretty the way it is. It's grass. God made it that way. Why should you cut it?
You know, he really is a man after my own heart. That's my biggest pet peeve. My second biggest pet peeve is when people talk about amazing things, like they're talking about a freshly cut, mowed grass, right? These things that we talk about here, you know, and I spend the majority of my time speaking about are, you know, what I call revelationary. You know, the revelations that are incredible. They change the way we see everything. They change the way our perspective on the world, and they have the ability to change the hearts and the minds of the people. I can't afford to talk about those things as if they're not that big a deal, because they are. You know, and fortunately, sounds like Jeremy, I've been able to maintain my own personal awe and wonder of these things, no matter how much I talk about them. They're still incredible to me. They're still amazing, and I do think that
I love the fact that you love your kids. I love the fact that you love your kids, and you talk about your kids all the time. You know, when I first met you, that was one of the first things that impressed me about you. You know, and that's why I'm kind of on your show tonight, to talk about my kids all over the world. You know, I don't want to just give them fish. I want to teach them how to fish. And, you know, by putting them in a better position, I have kids in Africa that are, you know, in Cameroon in particular. This is where I wanted to start the project, because in Cameroon, the kids, you know, they get on the phone with me and they call me and they talk to me, you know, from Cameroon. And I already had an orphanage in the Congo, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in the Congo. But I know who the kids are. I'm more aware of their background and education. And some of the kids in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, you know, their parents either died of AIDS or some other nefarious thing. And some of them, the parents put them in there because they just knew that they couldn't take care of them, you know? You know, there's a combination, there's a whole variety of combinations. But something happened about 3 years ago that really bothered me. I had 2 kids in the Democratic Republic of the Congo that had an accident, and they both ended up in the hospital. And I didn't have money at the time to take care of them. They ended up dying in the hospital, both of them. And then the hospital wanted 600 euros per child to release them back to the community. I didn't have that either. That's, 600 euros. And that wasn't even going to pay for the funeral. That was just to release them back into society.
The bodies.
Back to the community. Yeah. And I thought, that is not right. It makes no sense. How can you do that to kids? I was heartbroken, and it threw me for a loop. And then I got into a conversation with UNICEF and United Nations in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And they told me that if I allowed them to inject my kids and sterilize them, then they would be taken care of for as long as they lived. Needless to say, I lost all my titles of being a bishop, a priest, and everything else, because what came out of my mouth after that was not pleasant. I lost all my dignity that day. I really did. I was very angry, and I've heard you say that Kim is above United Nations on some levels and so on, and I don't understand the correlation, but they are a bunch of nefarious people. They're not even liked in South America.
Well, yes, I can speak to that a little bit. So the United Nations, the way it was structured, has always been designed. They were established in 1946, and they were always designed to bring the whole world under the New World Order, or a one world government, to do away with all of our cultural identity, to control the slaves of the planet, which that is all of us. There is all of us, all of the human beings on the planet were considered slaves. And that was designed by the great dictator, who was the one who was actually over the entire planet and was the sole sovereign monarch for many, many, many years. And in that position, he was a Marduk. Not Marmaduke, but Marduk. But Marduk was since Babylon, or before, I'm sure. But he had divided everyone against each other. And that's the principle. Whether that's the exact event that took place in the Bible or not, the principle in the Bible is that you have, in Babylon, or they were building the Tower of Babel, and the reason why we call it Babel, when you mutter on, we call it babbling. But what happened is all the people at that time. Now, this is my understanding. This is not common. This isn't commonly taught, but we would all speak using frequency and images that we literally could speak without any words at all. So communication was clean. There was no words involved. And so what happened was everyone was somehow, given an understanding, so they started to think in words, right? And each of them kind of, had a different language. And because they had a different language, I'm walking around speaking Chinese, and you're walking around speaking English, and so I don't understand you. We could be best friends. I don't understand you anymore. Right? And our natural connection has now been disrupted. Our natural frequency to communicate with one another using our natural vibration and imagery is gone. And the words that we're using now are totally confusing. So now we're confused. So I find someone else speaking Chinese, and we leave, right? Like, hey, I don't know what's going on here. These people are crazy. And we start speaking Chinese, and we leave, right? So my little group of Chinese-speaking individuals and your group of, English-speaking, and another group went off to Spain and whatever else. So this is the idea. This is the principle of the story. Again, I'm sure it didn't happen that simply, and I'm not trying to oversimplify, but just to try to have it make sense. The idea is, it goes back to, by the way, is with like the Latin Mass, right? It's the use of language as spells. That's why we spell words, right? So using language to cast a spell on people and separate us, right, from each other. So words, in many cases, and this is why I'm very, very careful about the words I use, and I do my best to be consistent with that. Because words, if not used the right way, they create their own frequency, which blocks the message that you're trying to put out and blocks people from hearing it. But on the other hand, words used the right way, in line and accurately with what you're trying to say, can actually just help you focus your message at this point, right? So I'm a believer that we're not going to go back to telepathic communication in the very near future, but but certainly having the right words to say and know how to use them is very important. And the United Nations, they are an extension of that same group from Babylon. That is you can trace it back to see exactly how they wanted to implement these things. You can look at the Iron Mountain Agenda that they met in 1967, or they finished up in 1967 rather, and they actually came up with a whole plan that we're seeing play out in front of us. And there was a speech there, I think it was Roger Welch, I think is his name, but it's going around Twitter right now, and we're actually going to put a video out about it on the Speak Project YouTube channel to break it down.
Yeah.
But he talks about 10 specific things, 10 things that were happening at that time in America, and he talked about the plan. He said, this is what they're going to do, and he explained it all. And I'm telling you, every single one of those things, and he said now the United Nations is one of the organizations, but they're just one of them that's going to do away with national borders, do away with culture, and they're going to completely have the American people surrender to them without any war. We would just surrender because we'd be so brainwashed by the time we got here. And he explained the entire mind control process. And if you listen to it, every single one of those things has been implemented. It talks about unnecessary spending. So part of this is we live in a war system, and because we're part of a war system right now, most of us think we just live in a regular world, and we have politics and a social aspect of ourselves and a religious aspect, and that war is as a result of those things. But it's not true. We actually live in a war system because the controllers view us as savages, and they think that we need war, and if we don't have war, we will be lazy and useless, and we won't be motivated to do anything. So they use war as a control mechanism, and politics and religion and social disagreements, they become the fuel they use for their reason to cause war. And then with war, you create such massive destruction that it forces a tremendous amount of unnecessary spending because all is fair in love and war, right? So they end up using all this extra unnecessary spending. So the premise mentioned in 1958, and again in the Iron Mountain Report, is it talks about getting away from a war system and crossing over to a peace system. But to have peace, their theory, again, not having any real connection to what it means to be human or any knowledge of the older history about humanity, they believed that we needed to have a common enemy to bring us together. So the environment was created as one of the enemies. So right now you have the false narrative of global warming, which is absolutely false. It is based on data collected and submitted by thousands of scientists, and then that data was completely perverted by the EPA and produced as if there was a major catastrophic problem. And every single word of that is a lie. We are actually going into a solar minimum. They also created the economy as an enemy. Now, the way they did that, he talked about in 1958, he said they will gradually devalue the dollar. They will raise prices. They will cause inflation. They will raise taxes. So all of these things were designed to diminish the power and the spirit of humanity, to really make it so we couldn't do anything great, that we couldn't pursue excellence, that we couldn't be who we actually are, and we'd be so busy working, we'd never really recognize our own power. And he goes through this line by line, and he specifically mentions the United Nations, saying how this is just one of the organizations where they're going to force us to become mandatory members of the United Nations, which is exactly the world you live in now. And it talks about how there has to be one military force strong enough to manage the whole world. And that's why the United Nations, which is supposed to be a peacekeeping organization, they have a formidable military force. And that is also paired up with NATO, which has their own military force. And you can see the UN jets and the UN attack vehicles. And those vehicles are never supposed to be on American soil. But I can tell you that they're on American soil, and you have seen them. Because anybody who's ever seen a police force that has a SWAT team or has, they have these military attack vehicles. Those are United Nations military attack vehicles. And the reason why? The United Nations has purchased a contract for most of the police forces in the country. That's why when you get pulled over, what we recommend is that you turn your lights on, put your hands on the steering wheel, and you tell the officers, I do not consent, I do not contract with you, I do not consent to being pulled over, and I would like to see your oath of office to prove that you are, in fact, a police officer serving.
Yeah.
So,
no,
because they can't.
I've studied free man on the land too. When I was a kid, I used to think United Nations would be a great thing if it united all the nations and it brought peace, love, and compassion to the world. However, since my mid-teens, I started becoming more and more aware of what United Nations was doing because I traveled a lot to South America with my grandfather, and I would witness things and I would say, that's not right. They're literally keeping people in a slave system. And, I always thought, one example, there's a train, a beautiful railway system in Chile that goes from the north end of the country all the way down to the south end of the country. Beautiful railway station, tunnels them along the road, and they're maintained more or less as a museum. Spain bought and built a beautiful highway, as they have in Canada. I know you have family here in Toronto and Montreal. The 407 is owned by Spain. It was built on Canadian taxpayers' dollars. Fantastic highway, but well maintained. But it was built by Canadian tax dollars and is now owned by Spain, and we pay Spain to use it. When I was in Chile, I used to get upset that every 10 kilometers you had to stop at a gate, like going across the border between Niagara Falls on the Rainbow Bridge coming into Canada. Why do you keep having to pay all these tolls? Well, it keeps the road nice, and keeping the road nice, there's no cars on the road. Nobody can afford gas in Chile. Nobody can travel, I went there and I paid for my own stuff to travel because I was fortunate. But, you can go for 100, 200 miles on that highway, and the only thing you will ever see is another bus. You won't ever see another car. And the people that have cars are from the 50s and 60s. They have, cars from the wartime, Second World War.
Right.
And they have had no development there whatsoever. People go, I knew one family, their son was one of my deacons. And the mother had health issues and whatnot. And she ended up going to work for a doctor that healed her. But the doctor kept her away from her children, who were still teenagers, literally 7 towns away from where she was, where her kids lived. And the doctor kept her there as his housekeeper. She was in servitude, and the kids had to fend for themselves.
Wow.
I watched so much of this in so many different places, and I'd watch little kids not having food. And when I was in Cincinnati, I don't know if you know Cincinnati at all, but I know Paul, coming from Kentucky, he would know Cincinnati, I'm sure. I would drive by over the Rhine, and I would see people with a beer belly, out on their porch, and their kids are running around in
Gunner, Did we lose Gerald, or did I get kicked off?
I'm here. I don't know what happened to Gerald. I think he got kicked off. Let me see if he's.
Gerald, if you lost internet service or something to that effect, I would imagine tune back in.
Yeah,
I can't hear you right now.
I can. His call got dropped. I can see that. I'll let you know when he calls back in.
Well, I want to talk about. I mean, he brought up a great topic, and he speaks about it from firsthand experience, which is absolutely incredible. And I can speak to some of those same things. I can tell you. There he is. Good. Thank goodness. Go ahead.
I'm back.
So you left off with Chile. You're talking about there's been no development, and that's the last thing we heard from you.
Somebody was trying to call me. That's what happens. Same thing that happens to you.
Yep.
You there?
All the time.
Okay.
Yep, I'm here. Go ahead.
Okay. I've watched the abuse of children. I've watched it in the Native tribes. I spent a lot of time on the Six Nations Reserve here in Brantford, Ontario. I watched the Canadian government give money to the chiefs, the various elders of the tribes, and they live in a lap of luxury when the people that live on the reserve, are drunk, are addicted to crack, cocaine, booze, whatever, heroin, and there was no reform for any of these kids. I always thought there's something wrong with this picture, and because of my situation and growing up predominantly with my grandparents, I didn't even know my mother was my mother till I was 7 years old. I thought she was my older sister. And my mother wanted it that way because, she wanted to protect me from my father. So, I was oblivious to so many things. And I often think, had my family loved my mother as much as they professed to, they would have helped encourage her to keep me with her instead of keeping me for themselves. I don't regret the way I was brought up. I was brought up with good values and a lot of love in my heart. But there's, I've heard you for the past 2 years, 3 years, fighting for your kids and protecting your kids, and I admire that in you. It's something that not a lot of fathers do.
I don't know how they
normally
can.
The mothers.
I don't know how they can.
It's normally something the mothers do, but not something that the fathers do. And I'm different. In my case, I'm protective of Jeremy. He's my heir, my legal heir, and I was protective of him as a little boy, and I'm still protective of him today. And when he came back into my life, I asked him, had this happened to him? Had that happened to him? And he said, no. He says, I always had a lot of love, and for my aunts and uncles and everybody. But he says the one person that I wanted it from was my mom, and my mom was always out working. She was a single mom, and she was always out working. And now I tell her to take a break, and I take care of him, and we see each other, we get along, and it's. But it took a long time to get there, and I said to them a couple of weeks ago, almost a month ago now, I said, look, you both love me. I want you two to both really get along because I need both of you in my life. And I'm going to undergo a 9-hour surgery next Monday. So, I'm going to have a lot of work done on me. Having my coccyx bone cut off and my tailbone cut off and muscle tissue replaced. They're going to remove the tumor at the base of my spine and move the muscle tissue from my stomach into my buttocks. after, and they're telling me anywhere from a 2 to 6 week recovery. I had prayed for something else to happen to me before that came about, but it is what it is.
Yeah. We Gerald had. I'm sorry, Gerald. You mind if I don't want to put your business out there. You mind if I don't want to get consumed with this part of it, but I just want to mention this because it's pertinent to the mission, and so I don't mean to. I don't want to take advantage of you. But is that okay if I mention?
No, go ahead. Yes.
So, the bishop has a specific, or had a specific kind of cancer, I'm going to say, and we actually here at Create Change, we have one of our project owners who actually does have one of several cures for cancer, and I had hoped that it would address Gerald's specific kind of cancer, but it did. In fact, it didn't actually, which is unfortunate. I would really hope that would fix the problem. But here's the tragedy. There's several other ways that we could have helped had the order not been so dead set on what is described by the AMA as the long, slow death process, which is pretty much what we call life, but what they implement with things like cancer, when they buried the cure, which vitamin B17 is a known cure for cancer, and there's actually certain nuclear pharmacists who mix things up, and they're trying to do that, but they've made vitamin B17 illegal. Now, everyone should ask themselves this question: what governing body would possibly make a common nutrient, which, by the way, your body naturally makes, vitamin B17, if you have the proper nutrients in your body? Now, what government would make a vitamin that obviously you need because it's in your body? Why would anyone make that illegal? Well, it's the Food and Drug Administration, which is actually not part of the government, that did that, and they made other nutrients illegal. And currently, for everyone who's in the United States, you should be up in arms because they are currently trying to take away natural supplements to make other things illegal. And they're trying to diminish our health. Now, we can continue to watch the charade that is happening in front of us with the government, and everyone gets very involved with these things as if they matter. First of all, they're pursuing something against President Trump that has absolutely nothing to do with anything. Because even if they found out there was collusion, it still wouldn't be illegal. It doesn't matter. It's not an impeachable offense. So, but they've got everyone so geared up on hating this man because he is not part of their order. He is systematically taking them apart. Well, really, I'd say that's more Kim, but it is happening nonetheless, right? There is a group that is actively working to do this, and it is happening right in front of us now for the first time where I can say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, it is amazing what's happening right now. But this is what drives me crazy, is this same group has blocked funding from coming in to, the whole Western Hemisphere, basically. They have blocked all the funding coming in here, and in that time, I've had to watch people, friends of mine like Gerald, who are struggling to survive literally as he's infected with a disease that we know we have the cure for and we could have developed and provided for him. That is the tragedy, which is the system that we have. That if they cared about human life, these things would be easily made available. They instead made them illegal. That is a question, and here is Gerald, this is my biggest issue, more than anything else.
Pet peeve.
It is not
pet peeve.
Pet peeve. Well, I guess I have a lot of pet peeves. I didn't realize until this conversation, but I have more than I thought. But my other pet peeve, but no, this is above pet peeve. This is the enemy. I am identifying the enemy for every single person out there. If you see this enemy, you need to identify it, call it out, start a fight, whatever you have to do, stop this from happening. It is indifference and apathy. That is what would kill humanity. If you want to know how you can make a difference, give a damn. Just give a damn. That makes all the difference in the world. Just actually caring about people, about yourself, about your children. You know, it breaks my heart to think there's a father out there who's not fighting for his children. What are you talking about? That child is you. There's no way any father should ever have anything going on in their life where they're not fighting for that child. That child is an expression of all that you are, right? With a person that and with a person that at some point you had feelings for, even if they were just attraction, and that's why they call it making love, because you make people. What else can you made a person? You're responsible for them. It's an amazing privilege. It's an amazing thing. There's nothing in this world. You don't even have. There's not even a close second to what it's like to be a parent. You don't have a single thing, not one thing on this planet. You can do all types of amazing things. None of it will ever compare to being a parent. None of it. And and you know what? I don't know how I prove that scientifically, but that is a scientific fact. So they're trying to take that from us, right? They're trying to destroy that in us. And Gerald's going through this very, very aggressive surgery because he had to take extreme measures that are, available in our current medical system. Gerald, I got to be honest, man. I do feel guilty that I haven't been able to do more for you. I really do. But I'll tell you what.
Tank, it's a matter of I've said a lot over the number of years. I've fought for a lot of people, and a lot of people dislike the fact that I stood up for so many individuals. And I'm sure when you talk about curses being thrown at people, I'm sure many have been thrown at me over a number of years. But I still maintain my faith. And I maintain my faith in all the good things that I believe that Jesus taught us. He only lost his temper once that I'm aware of biblically in the temple when they were exchanging money. And that's one of the reasons I knew that from being a kid. And it's one of the reasons I never felt we should be charging. If somebody wants to tithe something to the church, that's a different story, and I accept it gratefully. But if somebody wants to, if a priest stands up in the pulpit and says, I need this, I need that, and so on and so forth, blah, 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 get a job. I did.
Yep.
And, I have close to 8,000 clergy around the world, and I have a lot of people that are getting ready and geared up, and I know there's a couple of people that are up in Africa right now. In Uganda, there is an individual who is a grandfather of the king, and he's listening in Uganda because he speaks English. I have 2 people in Cameroon that are also listening because they speak English. But the rest of my clergy are predominantly French, so in Africa. And the grandfather and I talked yesterday, and he said to me, are you trying to amalgamate the French church with the English church? I said, no, I'm not trying to amalgamate them, but I feel that since I have a very strong presence there in the French communities, French-speaking countries in Africa, and you've named me a senator to your court and everything else. Your grandson, the king, has named me a senator to your court, and you've given me beautiful awards and whatnot for the stuff that we're working with and planning on doing. There's a lot of people that orphanages were built in real poverty by caring individuals who wanted to take care of the Rwanda mass genocide, the children of the mass genocide. And there's poor children in every single country that I have been in, and children running around on the street. Some people call them street urchins in English, but they're basically children that are less fortunate than others. I was blessed with a very good education. I speak many languages, as you know, and I want that opportunity available for everyone, but I want everyone to be creative like Jeremy. He has his drawbacks, but I encourage him to diplomatically stand up for himself and say what's on his mind with other individuals. With me, he doesn't have to hold back, and he calls me dad every now and then, and his mother is cool with that, because I've basically been the strongest father figure in his life when he was little and as an adult. Last year, he and Matthias were both here. Matthias came from the Netherlands, and they were both here, and they gave me a beautiful picture of the three of us in a frame that said, "This is our family." And I was quite honored and touched by it. It was simple, probably, bought at the dollar store, the frame, I don't know, but it meant the world to me because these were my kids. And I was honored by the fact that these two individuals, one is Bishop, he's 24 years old, and I consecrated him a bishop because he's more mature than most 50-year-olds that I know. And he's not in it for the money. He's in it, he studied about autism, and he took courses. I got to close my window here in my car. He basically decided to take courses in social sciences and social studies and psychology so that he could help somebody like Jeremy, because he realized Jeremy's potential. Matthias has lived here for 6 months at a time at different intervals and goes back to the Netherlands, and he has traveled back and forth. And he's seen all the good and the bad sides of Jeremy. And, he wanted to have a better understanding of it. And I encouraged him to do it because, and I didn't want him to study theology because I didn't want him to be polluted with all the dogmas. I wanted him to basically look at the life of Jesus, live the life of Jesus, and enhance the lives of other people like the life of Jesus. Matthias has been blessed like I have. He has celebrated in the Orthodox rite, the Anglican rite, and the Roman rite. And for a 24-year-old, I'm impressed with him. And Jeremy looks up to him like a big brother, He knows that he knows that if something happens to him, that Matthias will be there for him as well, And they love each other as brothers, and they're close friends, and they write to each other. But that's also why I want to protect the kids around the world, because no kid should be left behind. It's a travesty what is being done, and we are raising kids to be slaves, and we manipulate them to do this and do that at our own expense to glorify us. I don't want them to glorify me. I just want them to be good people, caring, loving individuals, and not do stupid things. And but a lot of things. For example, Jeremy and I, we were going over the bills, and I was showing him the water bill at the house, and he said to me, "Why do we have to pay a water bill? Doesn't the water come from God? Doesn't God give us free water?" I said, "Yeah, he does, but some people decide to pump it from one place to another and charge a fortune in the process. It's a manipulation, and it's manipulation on the worst levels, Everything is manipulation. And I don't manipulate Jeremy, He sees me doing something, and if I'm doing something and he sees me struggling, he'll offer to help. I don't force him to do these things. I don't want him to be my slave,
Yep.
It's going to become more important in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, he's going to be doing a lot more than he normally does, but he's okay with that,
Well,
I had to have a complete philosophy.
Yeah. In my experience, I'm sure it's an honor. You know, I know in the moments in my life when I've been able to assist my father or others that have played a role likened unto a father figure for me, I was always more than willing and humbled to be the one to have a say and be able to help them in any way. You know, I think that's natural, by the way. When you have a father, and that's part of the reason why they work so hard to break up the family unit, because, you know, I always reference back
part
to
of the reason you cut out.
Oh, I always go back to how important the family unit is right now, more than ever. And now that's what you created, Bishop, right? I mean, you created a family unit, you know, because that's the most natural thing for human beings to do. We just are a family. We are an extended family. And it always goes back to Willie Lynch, How to Make a Slave. You know, they designed this in such a way to constantly pit us against each other over nonsensical, unimportant matters, to create the illusion that our differences are reasons why we should be, you know, separated from each other. And we form communities of other people that have the same exact views as we do. And then in that, we create very defunct and we create deficiencies because we don't have a complete expression of the human experience. And I think it's very important that we recognize that our differences are what unite us. Our differences is why we should come together. Our differences are what make every human being a universe unto themselves, a unique experience that is profound and beautiful. And the more we can focus on things like that, like what you're talking about with your very, very diverse family unit that you have, I think it just brings the world into a much higher frequency. Gunner, am I off the air? Hello, everybody. Sorry, having a little bit of a technical difficulty there. And but we are back now, and I guess we've lost our people. Let's just see here. Now, I have callers on the line. I'm going to let you come in and talk if you want to say something. And I'm going to do that right now. If you're not there, it's okay. I'll wrap things up. But I'm going to bring in 801, and here you go. 801. Anything important to say?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Sorry, this is Gunner. Gerald is back on again. He just called me. He, for some reason, got disconnected.
No problem. Gerald, you there?
He should. Yeah, he should be on now. Gerald, are you there? Can you hear us? No, not yet.
That is okay, Gunner. I'm gonna wrap it up. So basically, there's about 1 million things here that the Archbishop has brought up. Some of which I'm not entirely in agreement with as far as the religious side goes. I have a relatively controversial view on some of these things. Even the term Christian means to be Christ-like. When the Messiah said that, Father, make them one as you and I are one, which means the same as. And the Messiah, everything in his ministry was about empowering the people. Everything he said, he told the same disciples that greater things than these shall ye do. He actually pointed out to the scribes and the Pharisees that he says, didn't I say in your scriptures that ye are gods? So that's one of those things that I constantly go back and forth on. I can't submit myself to those kind of those bylaws and this idea of worship. The way that they want us to worship a God, when in fact that doesn't appear to be what God is saying. If you really understand that everything about it is empowering you, and it's the same way your parents don't want you to worship them; they want you to go out and be the best version of yourself. So in like manner, I truly, truly believe that that is the intent that God has for all of us. Now, that being said, for the most part, that is just a side note, if anything, because what Archbishop Gerald, Dante, Mino stands for, I am in full agreement with. He is a man of high character. He has had an absolutely exceptional life. He has taken the hard path and the righteous path in every major decision in his life, and he is really an example set definitely for the Catholic Church and obviously for some young men out there, and certainly to many of us who face hard decisions all the time, where we have the option of pursuing money or pursuing, the right thing to do. And he demonstrated several times just in this conversation alone that there is a great benefit to choosing life. This is the decision that we are faced with all the time, that I talk about every single day. Deuteronomy 30:19, and it says, I place before thee blessings and cursings, life and death. Choose life. The concept and the idea of choosing life is not an abortion issue. Most people will never even face a decision like that. The reality is we face and have the option to choose life every hour of every day. We're given the opportunity to do the right thing or to make money at someone else's expense. We're given the opportunity to help somebody or to hurt somebody to get ahead. We are given these options every day, all the time. And the reality is this: choose life. Make that choice. Make that choice in everything you do. Choose to be better. Choose to be exceptional. I tell my sons all the time to pursue excellence with reckless abandon, and do not apologize for it. Do not make yourself be less than what you are to make other people feel comfortable. Fitting in doesn't even matter. Don't try to fit in. Don't try to stand out. Just figure out who you are and be the best version of yourself. If you can tap into that reality, if you can find out who that is and fall in love with that person first, that's the only way you're ever going to be able to love anybody else or be of any real use or impact and really find out what you're capable of. But when you find that, you'll realize that everything else in your life falls into place. And you know what? And even if things seem like they're falling apart, usually they're just falling into place. So we're in a time in history where we're in the biggest transition in human consciousness that has ever been. And we have this one chance to stand up to our bully, to stand up to the one who has oppressed us and tried to keep us in a state of subjection. We have this one moment in history to just say no. We will not back down. We will not be your slave. We will not give up. There's nothing they can do to make us surrender. This is a choice we make every day. Choose life. No retreat, no surrender. Have a good night, everybody.